Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 9, 2015 meeting of the City County Planning Board. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Today's meeting is being broadcast live by Winston-Salem TV digital media. It will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Our first order of business today is the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board is in work session, no one will be permitted to speak unless a board member asks a question. For general use district zoning, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district. Therefore, the petitioner may not refer to a specific use. For special use zoning, however, you must be very specific about the site, how it will be developed, and the uses that will be permitted. Items under Section B of our agenda require final action by either the City Council or County Commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations that will go to those bodies for their consideration. If you're addressing the board today, before you begin your remarks, please give us your name, address, to include the zip code, please, for our records. First order of business, we have 4 sets of minutes to approve, March 5, 12, 23, and 26. Were there any additions or corrections?
Move for approval on all 4.
Oh, second. Motion, Mr. Mulligan, second, Mr. Lamb. In discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Now call on Aaron King to present our consent agenda.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. First consent item is item B3. Zoning docket W3259, and this is a request to rezone about half an acre from limited office special use and RS9 back to RS9, and you can see the site there in yellow on the north side of Country Club Road, on Queensbury Road right there. And if you look at the site, you can see the rear portion of it is zoned LOS, and it's actually attached to that corner piece that's zoned LOS. That was brought in several years ago as one development, and the LOS piece we're looking at today was for extra parking. The developer of that corner piece no longer needed that extra parking, so it's now been included back with the original lot, and the applicants just wish to put it back to its original RS9 zoning, and staff is supportive of that.
Okay. No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing none, declare the public hearing closed.
Move approval. Second.
Motion, Mr. Lamb, second, Mr. Mulligan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Next item is B5. It's docket W3261, and this is a request to rezone a little under half an acre on Rinaldo Road from limited business, limited use zoning to the same. And you may remember this from a month or so ago. The site came in at that time, and the request was to go from LBS to LBL. There was a little bit of confusion, I think, on the petitioner's part. They thought they were carrying forward their previously approved LBS uses. They did not include those on the application, so the City Council has asked staff to initiate a rezoning on behalf of the city to add those original uses from the old LBS back into what was previously approved. So we'll be taking the old uses and combining those with services A, offices, and retail store for a new total list of uses, and staff would recommend approval of this request.
Anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing none, declare the public hearing closed.
Move approval. Second.
Motion, Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Mulligan. Any discussion? Yes.
Yeah, I'm not really opposed to this because I understand there was a misunderstanding, and it makes sense to allow the petitioner to have those uses back. I just wanted to make a comment about a couple of the uses that I think are not quite appropriate for this area. The convenience store use and potentially the building material supply. Under the area plan recommendations, I think it's low intensity commercial and offices. And I just think that especially the convenience store, if has a gas station attached to it, is not really appropriate. And I just don't want to see this used as a pretext in other cases for that kind of zoning. And that was the only comment I want to make.
Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion for approval. All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Next item is B6. It's docket W3262, and this is a request to rezone 1.2 acres on Indiana Avenue from RS9 to residential multifamily, 18 units per acre, special use limited zoning. You can see the site there in yellow. It's adjacent to the Salem Town campus and adjacent to the Stonewall neighborhood. Staff has reviewed this. The petitioner has offered up several conditions to offer some protections to the neighborhood with respect to setbacks, landscaping, lighting, and buffering. With those protections, staff feels this is a reasonable request, and we would recommend approval of the RM18L zoning.
Okay. Again, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing none, declare the public hearing closed.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Mulligan. Any discussion?
Yes, Aaron, has the neighborhood met on this, that Stonewall neighborhood?
Yes.
Did they meet, and everything was good with them?
The petitioners did reach out, and I believe there was a letter of support from the neighborhood on this case.
Good.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you vote, we need to revise a condition on that. It's under other requirements is condition A, and what we had in there was in addition to the minimum landscape buffer requirements, a 6-foot chain link fence which matches the existing fence along Indiana for Salem Town shall be placed along. And what we had was the interior of the buffer yard. Our thought was that maybe the neighbors wanted to see the landscaping versus the fence. And talking to the applicant, the property owners actually would rather have the fence on the property line and the plants inside. So we're fine with that, and we would recommend approval with that revised condition.
Your motion.
I amended my motion.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion, comments? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
And the last item is item B8. It's UDO text amendment. We've talked to you before about the placement of off-premises signs and designated highway corridors. It's UDO 258. We do need to continue this for 1 month. We did post that prior to the automatic continuance deadline, so it will be continued to the May meeting in order for us to do some additional notification on that.
You said 7, that is, right?
Number 7.
B7, right. Okay.
B7.
Yeah, continue. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I don't number in there. Okay.
Oh.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, next item on your agenda is zoning docket W3251. This was continued from your March meeting to allow the petitioner more time to meet with the neighborhood. Excuse me. The petitioner is Mid-Huff Ventures Incorporated, and the property is 2.13 acres located on the southeast corner of South Main Street and Cassell Street. The request is a special use limited request without a site plan rezoning from RS9 residential single family to HB highway business and HBL to HBL for the uses of offices, retail store, and Services A. Services A allows personal type services including hair salon, etc. But the petitioner has also agreed since your last meeting to exclude the use of tattoo parlors. This is the legacy growth management plan for Forsyth County. You can see the subject property there is located in the pink area. That's the urban neighborhoods growth management area 2. This is a zoning map showing the subject property with the site highlighted there in the center in yellow. Again, it's a little over 2 acres in size. It's currently undeveloped. It fronts on Main Street to the left. To the lower right of the image, you can see Highway 52, just a little bit off the screen there where Cassell intersects and then traverses on over to the intersection there of Main Street. You have a mixture of zoning. This site is primarily zoned, a little over half of the zoning is already highway business general use with no restrictions. The eastern portion is zoned RS9 single-family residential. You have some highway business zoning also across Main Street where Dixon Animal Hospital is located, some zoning, commercial zoning, limited business across Cassell Street, former nitty-gritty restaurant and nightclub is located, and then the rest of the surrounding zoning is single-family residential RS9. Aerial photograph showing the subject property. You can see a little bit there if you look closely in the subject property, the clearing there. It's a mowed, fairly flat area there, which is where any structures that would be built on the site would go. And that's already, for the most part, zoned highway business. The northern portion of the site is pretty heavily wooded that fronts along Cassell. There's a stream and a sewer line that traverse through the site. And mentioned in your staff report, the petitioner has agreed to a condition that there be no development north of that stream, no disturbance, no driveways, no buildings. The property is located in the South Suburban Area Plan, which was adopted in 2011. You can see there the site is shown in red, and it recommended the entire site for commercial. These images are taken on site. This is looking north on Main Street. The subject property there is to the right. This is an existing driveway entrance there. You can see the intersection of Cassell Street, and in the background, this is looking east into the subject property there, the flat portion that I mentioned earlier, already primarily zoned highway business. A single-family home located directly to the right with this wooden fence there along the property line there to the left. This is looking south on Main Street. There would be a 40-foot building setback from this fence because that property is zoned residential, and there also would be a 15-foot type 3 buffer yard required along that borderline there between the site and the residential property. Looking across the street again at Dixon Animal Hospital. Looking from the bridge there into the site there, this is the stream and the sewer line that I mentioned earlier. You can see Cassell Street in the background there, and this is right at the intersection of Cassell and Main Street. And then one more image there looking north. You see the former Nitty Gritty located there at the intersection of Cassell and Main Street. Since your last review of this, again in March, the petitioner has agreed to some building elevations that he has submitted. This is obviously a residential in character with a pitched roof and dormers, front porch, doors and windows, and some degree of brick. So we feel like that would certainly make it a lot more compatible than what could be built on the site currently with the residential homes in the general area. Staff's analysis is the site is now has split zoning, with the majority of the site already zoned highway business general use with no special limitations or conditions. The South Suburban Area Plan recommends commercial land use for the entire site. And the existing highway business district actually allows for 78 uses. Obviously, some of those would not be practical on this property due to the size, but just wanted to mention that there's a wide array of uses, some of them very, very intense, that are currently allowed on that property. These would include car wash, convenience store, motor vehicle, paint or body shop, and a restaurant with a drive-through. All of these uses, plus many more, have been excluded from this request, and the petitioner is only asking for the 3 uses of offices, retail store, and Services A, again with the Services A being further limited to exclude tattoo parlors. Also, the conditions that the petitioner has agreed to address building appearance, as I mentioned earlier, as well as signage. Right now, the Highway Business District allows for a 15-foot tall sign with 75 square feet in area, which is a fairly big sign, if you can picture that. The LB District allows for a 50-square-foot sign that's 8 feet in height, and the petitioner has agreed to that. So it's almost half the height of what he could currently construct on the site as far as signage goes. The other condition, as I mentioned earlier, is that the area north of the stream would remain undisturbed. No buildings, no access to Cassell, and again, the use of Services A has been further limited to prevent tattoo parlors. So staff's recommendation is for approval, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm curious as to why there was a recommendation for commercial on the RS property in the South Suburban Area Plan. It just seems to me like there would be some recommendation for a transitional zoning. Why was it straight up commercial?
Well, this was not, as you said, in a SLUCA, special land use area. I would imagine probably because the predominance of it was already zoned commercial in a pretty intense commercial district, highway business, that one of the things we do try to discourage is split zoning on a property. That can be problematic. So I would imagine just recommending that line be moved over was...
So it's because of the ownership, then, of the lot?
And the property lines.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Any other questions?
One more question. Gary, you said that this issue was continued from last month in order to meet with neighbors?
That's correct.
If you said it, I missed it. Was there a meeting with neighbors?
Yes, there was. There was.
Do you know how many people were there?
I'm not sure if that's in your report or not. The petitioner can...
Aaron King attended that meeting, and
Yeah, probably 20, 25. I may be wrong, but somewhere around in that area.
Very good, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Gary. Signed up as proponent, Mr. Middleton. Would you like to speak?
Bob Middleton, 257 Trinity Church Road, King, North Carolina, zip 27021. And to answer her question, why we wanted the back rezoned, because you got a 40-foot setback from any residential property before this lot, which is not feasible to use for anything, will give me that 40 feet. That's the answer to her question. If there's anyone else has any questions. We did have the community meeting since last time. There was approximately 20 to 25 people. 12 people voted in favor of me, 7 against. I thought we had everything worked out, but if you have any questions, I'll answer those, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in support of this? Seeing none, then we'll turn to the opposition. First person signed up, Mr. Van Eaton.
My name is Bernard Van Eaton. I stay at 210 Cassell Street, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27127. My opposition to it is that is predominantly a community area. We don't know what might transform. Nobody would ever think that the Leroy's Barbecue would have turned into the nitty-gritty down there. And we do have petitions in place, and I'm quite sure I think some of you have seen the petitions. And we also have gone around and took pictures of some of the other properties. Some of the properties, and I hate to say this, that is owned by this gentleman, that are in some of the areas are in very good shape, and they are in more so business locality. Some of the properties that are located into possibly what you could concern the mixed neighborhood, especially over there off of Broad Street, and there's another one over there on Peachtree Street, or Peachtree Square. It's on Wartown Street. You go by those properties, we don't want those type of situations to develop in our neighborhood. We already have had a problem with the nitty-gritty down there. We don't need any more problems, and who's to say? Now, I'm going to give you a good example. Sam Walton had Walmart set up. They didn't accept anything but American products. When Sam Walton died, they opened up the door to China. We don't know what can happen when this property is transferred to another person. They may not want to honor anything. We would like to keep our area residential. There's a lot of old people down there, and I am 71 years old, and we don't need any more problems than what we've already been assigned to down there. And we're trying to clean up and get our neighborhood back to where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Highsmith?
Good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Highsmith, the limit 3335 Anderson Drive, and I am here with the Southcrest neighborhood that Mr. Van Eaton represents, and I'm also here on behalf of the Conneaut Hills Community Association in opposition to the petitioner's request for developing parcels of land at the corner of South Main Street and Cassell Street that have been vacant for the past century or more and are surrounded by woods and a stream on its north and east sides and abuts directly against the Conneaut Hills neighborhood area on its south side. Both of the neighborhood areas surrounding these parcels would overwhelmingly prefer that this property not be developed at all commercially, given its extreme close proximity to both of our dense residential neighborhoods. The accompanying increase in traffic and traffic problems that could occur on South Main and Cassell Streets with such development, and just the overall poor quality of the land being developed. However, after plus a field trip to visit the 5 commercial properties owned by the petitioner, and given that the proposed zoning of the highway business limited zoning could actually improve upon the existing South Main Street highway business zoning that is totally out of character with the current residential areas, our neighborhoods have decided that we can only live with the highway business limited proposed zoning if we can respectfully request some additional neighborhood protective zoning restrictions. That is, the removal of the entire category of retail store, and under miscellaneous, and then under Services A, miscellaneous personal services, 2 additional removals of dating services and escort services, since the petitioner has already agreed for our request for tattoo parlors. The petitioner would be left with office in all the remaining long categories under Services A for the highway business limited zoning. We feel so strongly about this request that we started a petition campaign just April the 4th, where we've already obtained 82 signatures, and that was emailed to the planning board last night, and I have original copies here today to give to them. The ease of obtaining these signatures is as much about the neighbors protesting any development on this property as is the need to get the HBL zoning under control to protect our neighborhoods now and for the future. Our neighborhood areas absolutely need removal of these categories because directly across the street from the zoning case is now the vacant nitty-gritty, which was initially a family restaurant that morphed into a nightclub, and in 2013 was the site of gun violence and including alcohol and drug use. This area, unfortunately, still attracts unsavory criminal elements and illegal activities. As such, it's imperative that zoning around Conneaut Hills community area promotes safety and is neighborhood friendly. With the currently proposed HBL limited zoning, alcohol can be sold in retail stores or be used in a private club situation. Plus, business such as escort services and other non-friendly neighborhood business could set up shop at this location. From previous experience, Conneaut Hills knows that such businesses are notorious for attracting crime, especially in their parking lots. The field trip to investigate 5 commercial properties on this petitioner on Waltown Street, Wachovia Street, Indiana Avenue, North Patterson Avenue, and Ritz Drive really finalized our decision to request the removal of retail and dating and escort services. We found all of these multiple rental sites had a variety of zoning from limited business, highway business, and pedestrian business, but the petitioner is only renting to offices and services A. Except for a uniform shop and a road shop on Waltown Street. As such, our request to remove retail and these 2 additional miscellaneous personal services should in no way impact the petitioner's business plan or his bottom line. It will protect our neighborhoods. So in conclusion, the Conneaut Hills community urgently requests that the planning board members approve our request to remove the retail store and the 2 additional miscellaneous personal services so that our neighborhoods will have some sort of protection against this commercial development where once the petitioner builds his commercial units, which we find very residential friendly, our neighborhood still will have no control over who rents these units unless we have these zoning protections under the HBL proposed zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. No one else has signed up. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed.
I've got a question for the petitioner.
Mr. Middleton, could you come back up, please?
Sir, would you be willing to give up retail?
Do what?
Would you be willing to give up retail?
Well, there's no use being a retail building if you're not going to have retail.
Right.
That could be a flower shop. It could be many things, small enterprise.
How about those two uses that Ms. Highsmith mentioned?
I'd agreed to, I thought the community meeting, they said massage parlor, no massage parlor, no tattoo shop, and in the previous meeting, we talked about no alcoholic beverages ever be sold on the property. I do not have alcohol sales in any of my
How about
buildings.
the escort service business? With one other
No,
Dating service?
they can put that on there. I've done everything that they've asked to be done, except give up the retail.
You can live with the two exclusions that Ms. Highsmith mentioned, but you want to keep your retail.
Keep the retail.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any board members? Questions?
Well, I think with that being said, and what he's proposing here, it's and along with the elevations or whatever, they look like little houses. I mean, I know it's going to be a retail or an office space or whatever, but I mean, it softens when you build an elevation like this. It really softens what you put in a neighborhood, and with it being an HB area and commercial area, I think what he's proposing fits right in. I mean, and another thing that, the back of the lot is so rough that you're not going to be able to put anything back. Of course, he mentioned that. So I would say that if he's willing to give up those items that Clarence mentioned, the tattoo parlor, help me here.
Escort and dating services.
Escorting and dating service, then I would like to think that would suffice, and the neighborhood would be happy with that. And with that being said, I'd make a motion for approval.
With in the striking of those two permitted uses.
Striking exactly,
Yep.
And that's part of my motion is striking those.
Okay. Have a motion by Mr. Mulligan, second by Mr. Lamb. Discussion.
A question for staff. For the retail part of it, say if there was like a beauty salon and they wanted to sell their products, that would be considered retail, wouldn't it?
That would actually be services.
That would be under services.
You're allowed to sell ancillary products as part of services or anything else. I do want to bring up one thing about the uses that have been excluded. Now, we can add it to the list just to cover our bases, but the city code already specifically prohibits massage parlors, so we do not have that as a listed exclusion in the write-up. The city code specifically prohibits massage parlors within the city. Of course, there are exceptions to that for licensed massage therapists and those kind of things, which have to be state licensed. So as it is now, we don't have that in there because we didn't feel it necessary since it is illegal. But if the board wishes us, just for clarity's sake, to include it, we can. I think the motion
We just
was
talked
just
about
for
dating and escort
services,
services is
dating.
all we're talking about. Yeah.
Well, but I just want to make clear that he said he voluntarily gave that up, and I can't remember if Ms. Highsmith mentioned it or not, but I just wanted to make sure that
An
everyone's on the
antique
same-
shop, that'd be a little retail use for them. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I normally would not be in favor of rezoning to HB a residential lot so close inside a neighborhood. But I do think that on balance, you're getting a better outcome with the kind of downgrading of the uses on the HB, the existing HB. And the statement I think I heard the petitioner make about not selling alcohol, I think that goes a long way towards meeting the concerns of the neighbors. I think the only thing that's outstanding might be the drug paraphernalia stores, which I heard was a concern. But on balance, I think this is, a positive outcome.
And if I could just state for the record that zoning-wise, there's nothing we can do zoning-wise through a condition or a use exclusion or whatever to exclude alcohol. Right.
that's a state prohibition for local governments to control that.
Any other comments, discussion?
I'd like to, I'm challenged to be in support of this only because I am familiar with this neighborhood. And years back, I remembered the restaurant fiasco with the Nitty Gritty restaurant and how nasty and ugly it got and how badly it affected the neighborhood. And I do understand your reticence to entertain any other retail establishments going in that neighborhood. So I'm really hard pressed to be able to support this because of that reason.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion for approval? Those in favor? Opposed? Mr. Little is opposed. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is zoning docket W3256, and this case was also continued from your March meeting to allow the petitioners more time to discuss this request with the neighbors. The petitioner is Cleveland Avenue Christian Church, and the site is 1.11 acres in size, located on the south side of 10th Street between Cleveland Avenue and Mount Zion Place. And the request is a special use rezoning with a site plan from IP Institutional Public to LOS Limited Office for several institutional type uses, including shelter for the homeless. Legacy's growth management plan, it's located within the Pink Urban Neighborhoods Growth Management Area 2. And this is a zoning map showing the subject property there highlighted in yellow. It's currently the location of Future Leaders Daycare Center. It's about a 13,000 square foot, one-story structure there. You have the site borders 10th Street to the north, Martin Luther King Jr. Drive located down here, south of the site. Have some geo zoning around it, and quite a bit of multifamily zoning, around it. Also, you've got some recent multifamily investment just to the north of it, the Oaks at 10th Street. Aerial photographs showing the subject property. You can see the Kennedy High School and the Learning Center way over to the far left there going towards Highway 52. And the site is located within the East-Northeast Area Plan that was adopted in 2008. It's actually currently being revised, as you may be updated, as you may be familiar. Specifically identified the site for institutional use, but it also located it within the Martin Luther King, Cleveland Avenue, New Hope Lane mixed-use area. Shortly after that time in 2010 and 11, the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem underwent a significant area plan of their own, a small area plan process with a lot of community involvement for about a 130-acre site. And this plan was finalized in 2011, and the Planning Board endorsed it, as well as the City Council endorsed it. You can see the site shown there in the southern portion. The specific land use for that redeveloped area is the yellow townhomes. A close-up of that. The pink use is the existing church there, which you'll see in just a moment. And just to briefly go over it, the goal of that plan was to create a mixed-income, mixed-use neighborhood by increasing the density towards Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, attracting retailers, removing the superblocks by reconnecting the street grid, providing a new boulevard, and creating a pedestrian-friendly environment. These images are taken on site. This is from Cleveland Avenue, looking into the site there. Again, Future Leaders, Daycare Center, and this existing church just to the left. A little bit of close-up there. Really, the proposal does not result in any significant exterior change at all. It's just basically an as-built of what's there now, just reconfiguring the inside primarily. This is a little bit further north. The church, the site is just to the right. This is over on Mount Zion Place. This is a driveway into the site there. The site's to the right. The petitioners have also stated on their revised site plan that there's several large mature trees that these would remain in place. On the northern end of the site, the daycare there, the playground associated with that, the petitioners have also agreed to remove the top barbed wire of this fence. They need the fencing for protection of their future clients, but they have agreed to take the barbed wire part off. In the background, you see 10th Street and then some new housing. That's the Oaks at 10th that's recently been constructed there. And further north is Camden Place. Again, some more residential investment that has taken place in this general area. Bit of close-up there of the Oaks at 10th. This is a site plan showing the subject property there, the dark gray. That's the existing parking lot. It connects to Cleveland and Mount Zion Place. The blue is the existing structure there. Really not much change to the site plan at all from what's currently there. Staff's analysis is that the proposed LOS district is a reasonable zoning district for the subject property. Its LO is designed to be close to residential districts. It has frontage on Cleveland Avenue, which is a minor thoroughfare. There's pretty much of a good mixture in the broader area of zoning districts in that area. So LO is comparable from our standpoint to the existing IP district. The site is located close to transit and a network of social services which would clearly benefit the proposed shelter for the homeless. So we certainly see the petitioner's desire to locate in this facility. But the proposed use of shelter for the homeless could have negative impacts on the existing and the planned residential properties and reinvestment that I mentioned earlier. The request also may hinder the long-term redevelopment potential of the Cleveland Avenue area and the realization of the Cleveland Avenue Initiative Master Plan. And the shelter for the homeless is not typically a use which is recommended for inclusions with pedestrian-oriented activity centers. Staff would note that we certainly appreciate what the petitioner, or in this case the Salvation Army, does for this tremendously vulnerable and unfortunately growing population, the homeless in our community. There's many institutions, and certainly the Salvation Army is one of the ones on the forefront that are working towards reduce homelessness in Forsyth County. And we can see how this location would benefit not only them, but their vulnerable clients. We just have some concerns about the compatibility with the new residential investment there and the long-term realization of this plan. So staff's recommendation is for denial, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions of staff at this time? Okay, we'll have the public hearing. First,
I have a question. Is the Oaks, is that private sector or is that public sector project?
The Housing Authority sponsored that, but I think the development in the Cleveland Avenue Master Plan, the intent is that that would be a mixture of different types of investments by different parties, not all of which would be the Housing Authority. But I think they were the spark behind the Oaks at 10th.
How far south on that map is Innovation Quarter? Is it 3 blocks?
Well, you go basically to the west there. That's Martin Luther King that's curving around there, and just when you get on the other side of 52 is where so maybe 4, 5, 6 blocks.
And this is just to the east of the Career Center in Kennedy. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? First person signed up, Major Allison.
You're going to let Lucy go first?
Okay.
I'm Lucy Painter. I live at 769 Westover Avenue, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27104. I am the chairman of the Salvation Army Board, and thank you for letting me speak to you today. The Salvation Army has been in our community for 100 years, over 100 years. Wherever they are, people are served and stability is helped. Recently, the Salvation Army moved their command headquarters to the Cleveland Avenue to be closer to the people they need to serve. This also puts them in the midst of the healthcare systems and the 2 boys and girls clubs that they run for the good of our youth. To further their presence in this area, they wish to buy the daycare center and use it as a shelter for families. Again, they will bring stability and safety to an area that needs this. This is just for the short term, and they do not wish to interfere with any long-term projects the Housing Authority has already planned for this area. We want to be good neighbors in the Cleveland area and offer an even greater level of stability. Those living around the command office have voiced their approval of our extended presence amongst them. The church directly next to the daycare center is in favor of our use of this facility. We need to separate our family emergency shelter from the other program administered at the Center of Hope on Trade Street. That is the ex-offenders reentry program. So this gives our search for an appropriate space for the family shelter some timely need. Again, we would be updating an older building and adding value to it. We do not intend to be there for more than 5 years, and we pledge to sell it to the Housing Authority or business when they are ready with their long-term plans to use this area. This would give the Salvation Army a safe place for adults and children seeking emergency shelter, and it would give the Army the time they need to find a location in our city for a permanent office and a permanent family shelter. I respectfully ask that you give us the short-term solution to our city's need and the Army's call to ministry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Major James Allison, 901 Cleveland Avenue, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101. Thank you so much for the opportunity to represent the guests that we have today at our family shelter on Trade Street. Today, the Salvation Army has been serving as a safe haven for homeless families for 50 years plus. We provide them a place they can call home. We provide their children a place they can list as their living address. We provide them with dignity. We provide them with the opportunity to recollect their lives and reorganize their lives and have an opportunity to reestablish themselves into permanent housing with a positive slant on life. Today, there are 84 guests at our Center of Hope and our family shelter. Today, 40 of those guests are children. On any given day, the majority of our residents will be children who are families. Much of the misconception that the shelter will be for men only. It is a family shelter. Predominantly, our guests will be single mother heads of household. Occasionally, we'll have single father heads of household, and occasionally we'll have mom, dad, and the children who will occupy our space. The beauty of this location is that it places our guests in a situation, in a location that gives them quick access to transportation. We provide our guests with bus passes so they can get out into the community, find a place to meet with landlords and so forth, a job, and all that is necessary. Also, this is a place that is in close proximity to the Department of Social Services, Mental Health, and the Health Department, and other much needed services. As far as the neighborhood is concerned, we have sent out 40 invitations to adjacent property owners. We personally distributed 200 flyers. We had our meeting, a community meeting on March the 26th from 10 to noon and 4 to 6 p.m. so that we give the evening, those who work, an opportunity to come in the evening. 18 individuals came by that day, only one in opposition. We have also have 28 signatures on the petition of support. We also have received letters from Thea Greer with G.W. Holland Homes, Bishop Sheldon McCarter, Greater Cleveland Avenue Christian Church, and Reverend Darrell Aaron, First Baptist Church on Highland Avenue. As I said, the rationale for the relocation is very simple and very plain. we need a short-term solution to provide adequate services to those who call the Salvation Army home during the most desperate time. I don't know if any of you have ever been homeless. I've not. I don't know what it feels like to show up to a strange office with everything I own in a Ziploc bag. I don't know what that feels like, but every day that happens, and every day the Salvation Army, because of the great outpouring of support and love in this community, is able to be there for these individuals. Much to the chagrin, folks think that we're possibly going to bring disparity to the neighborhood by being there short term. And I'll just ask you to look into the faces of these individuals and who would call this place home, who would call 934 Cleveland Avenue home until they can get into permanent housing, who will also be able to continue their schooling and so forth for their children. I don't see disparity or rabble-rousers in the faces of these women and children and the folks who will call 939 Cleveland Avenue home. And therefore, I respectfully request that the Planning Board give positive recommendation to move forward with this rezoning so that Salvation Army can continue our heritage of providing a place that homeless individuals, families, can call home. Thank you so much.
Mr. Major,
Yes, sir.
how many units would you have proposed in that building?
96.
96?
96 beds.
96
96
beds, but how many families?
We have 84 beds currently in our facility. So it would increase our capacity by 12 people, which is very important. We have a commitment to serving homeless families in this community. Commitment is that if we're full, then we rent a hotel until we can make room in the shelter for these families because it's critical that families have somewhere to call home in that critical time of their life.
Major, is there any kind of a guideline around how long a family may be able to stay?
Our goal is, we're part of the continuum of care and the rapid rehousing process, and so we want to move them on as quickly as we can. However, when you become homeless and come into our facility as our guest, there are certain circumstances that create your homelessness that could include bad credit and so forth, and so it takes possibly longer than 30 days. The Salvation Army is committed to work with that family until we get them into permanent rehousing. So that's not a vague answer. That's just how we roll at the Salvation Army.
I think what I get from that, it's a work in progress. It's a work
Yes,
that
sir.
you all do all the time. It doesn't become a lifestyle for them because
Right.
you keep them moving and keep them looking and helping them, and I
Yes,
think
sir.
that's fantastic.
I mean, each family has a case manager. So what we're experiencing now is certain families that do not meet the criteria for rapid rehousing, and so we are taking it upon ourselves to work with them in concert with other organizations in the community to continue to move them forward. They're homeless. They have nowhere else to go, and we want to be there for them. And if you'll partner with us and give us a chance, we'll be there for them.
We'll go ahead and conclude.
Another
Yeah.
question. How do we enforce the temporary nature of this arrangement that both of you have spoken about? Is there an option that's been granted to the housing authority? I know you don't own it. You don't own it yet.
We don't own it yet,
Right.
no, sir.
How
Our long-term plan for the Salvation Army through the leadership of our advisory board is to move forward to raise capital funds to eventually buy a piece of land that will be properly or rezoned. We may be back properly zoned, where we can build our administrative offices, our emergency assistance offices, and our family shelter as well. So this is short term. I can't give you a number of years. I can't. I just can't do that. But this is not somewhere we're viewing as a permanent home by any stretch.
But this zoning would not have a time limit on it. I mean, it's good.
Zoning runs with the land.
Yeah, right. So-
And the other thing I'll point out is that, of course, the use that's designated in the UDO that was put into this was shelter for the homeless. Now, without a condition further limiting it, it's any kind of homeless shelter.
Right.
So I don't know whether the petitioner is, now that they've said that it is exclusively to be families, maybe that's another option to pursue as well in terms of a condition.
Yes, Major, at your other location, you have another population that I believe it still resides where the families are there. Don't you have another population?
Yes, sir. We have a residential reentry center.
Any inclination to limit this population to families and not include the reentry population?
We are not moving the reentry population. They'll remain at Trade Street.
Okay, and I know, but this allows all kind of homeless, so I guess the question is, would you voluntarily be willing to limit the use of this particular property not to be for reentry?
Sure. I mean, that's not in our...
It's not in your plan anyway.
Yeah.
Paul and I were discussing whenever it came to light that this was going to be used exclusively as family, and if they are willing to do so, we have a definition in the ordinance as far as how family is defined, and it deals with foster children, it deals with adopted children, and it deals with the third degree of collateral kinship, but we have a way that if they so desire to limit this to families, we could enforce it.
Okay. Well, my question to you, Major, is would that put a burden on you for that to be put on it?
I do not see that as a burden. As I said, that we need to relocate our family shelter. And we work in partnership with Bethesda and Samaritan. We do the families, they do the men, the women, and so forth. And so this is our commitment to the community, which we do not plan to break, the family shelter component.
Yeah, okay, I guess what I keep thinking is if somebody comes in an individual comes in at 10 o'clock at night, let's say, or whatever, you would take him to one of your other shelters? That's the kind of burden I mean.
Certainly. We only admit families. We do have 10 beds for single women, but that's it outside of the families. If a gentleman came in and had no children and was alone, we do not take them in. We're not equipped to handle that. We're not set up, configured to handle that type of situation.
Oh, okay.
And keep in mind, too, that just recently you all recommended approval, and it got approved by both the city and the county governing bodies to broaden the ability to have temporary shelters for the homeless and by churches and things like that. So.
Okay.
I'm completely in support of this. I'm interested in knowing the one person that you said came to one of the community meetings, neighborhood meetings, that was not. What was the reason why he or she was not?
I didn't discuss that with him personally. I made the presentation that I made to everyone who came and asked him if he was interested in signing the petition of support, and he said no. At that point, our discussion subsided.
Thank you.
I mean, it was not in my purview to try to persuade him. In other words, that was not our intent for the open forum.
Let's go ahead and conclude the public hearing. There might be some more questions later, Major. So is anyone else that would like to speak in support of this? In support? Okay, then we'll turn to the opposition. You'd like to speak in opposition?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please give us your name and address for the record, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry C. Woods. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem. I live at 2455 Northwick Drive, Apartment 102, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, zip code 27103. We have been meeting with the Salvation Army, and we work very closely with all the shelters here in Winston-Salem. We have changed our policies that have actually opened our doors to house homeless families coming through the shelter program, and it has been a tremendous success, and we're looking to expand this program. As Mr. Paul Norby had stated earlier, we took a venture of using our own funds to develop what we called a Cleveland Avenue master plan. It was an area that, prior to us taking a look at it, we viewed as an economically challenging neighborhood. We did not see any vast private sector or public sector dollars going in. We did not see any new developments being built. Retail businesses were leaving. It was becoming more of an area where homeowners were leaving and investors were buying, and they were bringing in additional short-term renters. Property value was going down and crime was going up. We had met with Mr. Paul Norby as it relates to the legacy plan. We felt the plan was excellent, but he made it clear to us it was a plan, and we asked him if we took a part of that plan and developed it on our own, would his department and the city work along with us? And to my blessings, they did just that, and this body here did approve of our master plan, and it has been approved by the city council, and it just wasn't a plan that was in writing. We have invested close to $9 to $10 million thus far, $5.5 million in the Oaks at 10th. It is a new development that does not look like public housing. Our housing is what we call step-up housing. It's to assist families who want to reduce their dependency on third-party payment and move back into mainstream so we can make room for other individuals who have housing difficulties. We're now building Camden Station, 30 more units, and we've arranged with other nonprofit groups to have set aside of units for their graduates to come into this program so they can begin to move back into mainstream. We also recently purchased the Brown School property, which is about 2 blocks away, which we intend to invest about $12 million in building a new senior building. We have a $500,000 HUD grant starting from 14th in Cleveland going up to Bethesda Place, where we're having a planning grant that we put another $250,000 investing in, and we have very good public participation, both from the community and nonprofit groups and service agencies, from the police department, fire department, health department, both hospitals, the Board of Education, colleges and universities. It is an area that we believe has a lot of good potential. We're looking at trying to bring in a supermarket, an area that right now is devoid of any major private investment. We are in the same business as the Salvation Army. We are here to help those who need help. My concern is that the plan that they are proposing is not congruent with our master plan. We had promised this community back in 2010 and 2011 that our goal was to transform this neighborhood and turn it into one that was an economically challenging one, that became a mixed income where people can work, live, and play. We think the shelter is a great idea. It is clearly needed. We don't think that the location that they're proposing is appropriate for this community and will actually hurt in bringing in private investment and could slow down the momentum that this community has moved forward. I have visited their Center of Hope. It is an excellent building. It provides great service. There's no doubt about it. The photograph that the major showed, it is heart-wrenching. It is. And I met some of the families there and talked with them. We just don't believe that putting it in this particular location at this time is compatible with our master plan and is in the best interest of this community. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
In your talks with the Salvation Army, are you aware of how many units may be or how many families may be housed specifically in that site?
Yes, we know that there could be up to 94 beds in that site, and we know that they're looking at families. We discussed that with them, and a whole number of issues. Again, I've met with them in their offices, myself and my vice president, Mr. Kevin Cheshire. We met with them. I've actually visited them on my own to go to the Hope Center. There's no doubt about it. They have a good program. I'm not here to say that their program has faults or problems. We're saying is that this location is critical for our master plan because it's about trying to get resources in to build townhomes that are affordable and will bring in young working families who would then become long-term stakeholders. And bringing in a shelter, we believe, the term shelter in this community at this time is not a positive image that we're trying to project. I have no, again, hard feelings or trying to scuttle their plans. I'm more than willing to work with them and help them find a proper location. But putting it in front of our $5.5 million development that opened up less than 18 months ago, 2 blocks away from a $3.7 million new construction project, 2 blocks away from a brand new senior building we're proposing to build in a few years, we don't think it's good for this community.
Do you have plans to buy that piece of property yourself?
We have talked about it us here internally. We're not in a position right now to buy it. Our funds are a little tight right now, but our goal is to develop that property and to build according to the master plan that was shown here, to have townhomes there, and along Cleveland Avenue would be mixed use for both retail and residential going above.
You said your program now already helps homeless families.
Yes, we
How
have.
many do you have? Are you serving?
We have set aside 44 units in our family development for any homeless family that's involved in a 1-year intensive case management. We have been doing that now for the past almost 3.5 years, and we have then opened up, if after 1 year they are living within the rules and regulations and they're still involved in case management, we take 25% of that population and give them permanent housing in our development to open up so that someone else can come in. I'm happy to say that the work that the Salvation Army, the Bethesda Center, the Crisis Mission, and other homeless centers, out of 3 years, we've only had 1 eviction. We have changed our policies so that we can help agencies to move families from homelessness into permanent housing. That's not what I'm arguing against. What I'm believing is that the location of this shelter at this time in this area is not congruent with our master plan and could slow down, deter private investment as well as our own motivation.
Okay. You have 44 units. Are they full now?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long would it take on a typical waiting list to get these 40 kids out from over this unit into some of your housing? A year or so?
The way it works is we meet with the agencies on an ongoing basis, and they make recommendation if a family is that they deem is able to live independently. If they make that determination, and we have an opening, we would then open that unit up for that family.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the petitioners were saying that this was going to be a short-term project, that it was not going to last more than about 5 years. And assuming that we could hold them to that, would that influence your opinion at all, or do you still see this as hampering the progress of the plan?
I believe I heard the mayor say that he did not want to be tied down for a specific length of time. Again, we think at this time, having the term shelter being put into this community, even for a short term, we're trying to bring in, again, retail businesses. We're trying to get private sector dollars to come in. Having a shelter coming in, we believe, will make that opportunity more difficult and slow it down. This is already an economically challenged neighborhood that we're trying to turn around. Adding a shelter does not enhance that plan.
Mr. Wood, have you heard any opposition from residents that reside in some of these new developments that are within blocks of that?
I have not talked to the residents to the Oaks at 10th, but I will say that our Oaks at 10th is a model that other housing authorities, not just in North Carolina, but across the nation. To live at the Oaks at 10th, you must be employed. It's not about how much money you make, but it's the first step. You must be employed. And then there's a plethora of services. We have a contract with Winston-Salem State University where the teaching students who are becoming certified teachers work with the youngsters on our site so that we can break the cycle of poverty. So we are clearly in the same ballpark as the Salvation Army. We're about trying to help families reduce their dependency on third-party support and become self-sufficient and also hopefully become homeowners or move back into private sector housing. That is not my opposition. My opposition is having a shelter at this location at this time hurts our master plan effort.
Mr. Woods, you may or may not remember, I actually attended that meeting back in 2010 when you first had that first meeting, and was very impressed with what you and the group that you all hired to put together on Cleveland Avenue. The thing that I keep thinking here, and you said it, but maybe I just don't understand it, is it looks like it's a win-win situation to me. I mean, you've got an area where there's already a lot of homeless people there. They're just wanting to help with this, and the position you're in your housing, I mean, it looks like to me that their people could come into your housing. I mean, and they're working to do that just like you are. And I agree with the 5 years, because not only would I, as a Salvation Army person, they, you know, but it would also be you, because you couldn't stand here today and correct me if I'm wrong, please, and say, yeah, we'll buy it in 5 years, because you've got to have the financing. You don't know that you'll have that financing. They don't know that they can sell it at that time. So I think that could be worked out, though, you know. But, you know, I just keep thinking that it's, if we work together on this thing, it's a win-win. And I think what you're saying is, I just don't want this in my neighborhood. And I don't like hearing that being said, if that's exactly what you're saying, because these are family people. They're good people. I mean, you deal with these people. I've dealt with the homeless people. I mean, I know that they're really good people. I think they're really misunderstood in lots of cases. They understand them, and you understand them, and I understand them a little bit, hopefully. But I'm really, I don't know, hurt to hear you say that, you know, you don't want this in your neighborhood when you're creating that and you're creating housing, better housing, and that's all they're trying to do is to help these families. And it makes me want to cry for that not to be worked out.
Yeah, I just want to first correct any misgivings that you may hear in my voice. This is not about not in my backyard. This is not about that at all. We took a risk in investing in this neighborhood. We're now at the point where we're asking banks and private investors to come in and invest in this neighborhood. We strongly believe that having a shelter in this neighborhood at this time, at that location, is not congruent with the development of this area at this time. Again, I've said this to the Salvation Army. We're more than willing to work with you, more than willing. But we think at this time that this is not the best use for that land, and it's not congruent with a plan that this body supported wholeheartedly. And we made a commitment that it just wasn't going to be something in writing. We took that plan after it was adopted and went out and found money to make it work. We bought Johnson Square, tore it down, and built brand new. There was 4 buildings on the corner of 12th and Cleveland. We bought that property, tore it down, hired a local architectural group, and now we're building 36 brand new units, very large units. We're about to consider building an 80 to 90 unit senior building. We are investing in this community, hopefully to stimulate others to come behind us and make a similar investment. We think having a shelter at this time defeats out that purpose. It has nothing to do with not in my backyard. I'm trying to move this community forward. This is a community that prior to us making to this investment, I've only been here since 2006. Folks say that all the investment that happened in Winston-Salem, for some reason, this particular part of the city, no one's investing. We are one of the largest landowners in this area, and we felt that we had an obligation to try to turn it around, and we're close to it. So it's not that I'm saying not in my backyard. I'm saying at this particular time, it is not what we think is the best use of that property, and it's not congruent with our master plan.
You have folks at your sites of mixed economic background. Am I correct?
Yes.
So at the Oaks, and what is the other site?
Camping Station, which we hope to have online by August or September of this year.
I have a reasonably ear that's low to the ground regarding folks that are going to be moving to the Innovation Quarter area. Is it your hope that some of those residents who may not be able to get housed in the Innovation Quarter area may spill over?
That is our ultimate goal. We're hoping that the townhouses that we build on the Sunrise Tower site and this site here would be attractive and affordable to attract some of the employees coming into this city to work in the Innovative Quarter. It's only a 5-minute bicycle ride away. We've met with them for many, many years to discuss this. They like the idea. We worked with the school system. We were very pleased when the school system decided to build a career center, because that brings another asset, another amenity that helps promote this neighborhood. And we are continuing to do things that would try to turn the image of this neighborhood around. That's all we're trying to do.
I'm with you. I'm actually a former resident of that neighborhood. I grew up there. So I hear what you're saying.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed.
I have a question for staff. If you look at the existing uses, IP uses allowed, and you have other uses like, or with the planning board, family group homes, habilitation facilities, how different is what the Salvation Army wants to do versus something like that? I mean, is there because it's a family in need, they're different from, I don't understand what I guess I'm asking, habilitation facility or family group homes, what type of occupants are defined in those?
Well, the family group home would have overnight residency, as would the shelter for the homeless. Some of these other uses obviously would not be on that type of permanent basis.
Family group home A and B are limited to no more than 12 folks, but these are family group homes are essentially either folks that are recovering from drug dependency, alcoholism,
Mental
health, things like that come together to live as a single housekeeping unit.
So that's the family unit, essentially, is that group?
Correct. Now, the habilitation facility A and B are, and I'll read you the definition here.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Any facility in which, and it's one of those things where, habilitation facility A and B are somewhat similar to family group home, but it's any facility in which 1 to 8 handicapped persons receive habilitation services, rehabilitation services, or engage in recreational activities, regardless of whether these services and activities and activities are therapeutic or educational in nature. But the difference being that it's not overnight. They don't live there. They go there and receive the service,
and you
kind of like a sheltered workshop or something like that.
You might recall we just recently did a text amendment on that because those are typically offered in office-type environments, very, very lightweight types of uses.
I'm trying to categorize how different this would or would not be from typical use.
It's much more intense.
And also the scale. I mean, the use allows up to 100 beds, and so from a comparative standpoint to the family group home, it's a lot larger.
Okay.
And a family group home, again, is typically supposed to immerse itself and be part of, even though it's allowed in IP, recognizing that, sometimes IP are transitional uses in neighborhoods, but family group homes A and B are generally associated with and become acclimated in single-family and low-intensity multifamily situations, whereas shelter for the homeless is one of the most intense uses. Unless you go through the special use district zoning process, which is what they're doing, you actually have to get an elected. Even if you have the zoning in place for a shelter for the homeless use, you have to go to and get an elected body special use permit. But through the special use district rezoning request, if you specifically ask for that use, it's handled through the council or county commissioner rezoning. But it's
the difference being the people being served are homeless or not, in a way. That's what's confusing me, and I know there are technical definitions in the rules and how things are being done.
And it's also the number of people.
It's the number of people and the intensity.
Because, someone theoretically who is homeless could be in a family group home A or B if they otherwise qualify, but then at that point it's not a shelter for the homeless, it's their home.
So then the real issue is that they're homeless or how many people you've got there, or both. I'm trying to understand where the sticking points are or not in the rules and how it fits in with what else is going on in the neighborhood.
I think it's a great parallel between low or moderate density residential and multifamily unlimited. It is literally that big of a difference. So, you don't want a massive apartment. You don't want a super densely developed apartment complex sitting right next to a low to a low density or to a moderate, 3 to 5 units per acre. You don't want 60. You got 2 acres here and you got 50 families or 30 families. I don't know what that comes up to, but your density is, I think that's the biggest parallel. That's not the biggest issue I have with this. The biggest issue I have with this is unless you're going to have 100% public money developing the master plan of the housing authority, a shelter will make private investment more difficult. I really do believe that. And we have really spent a lot of time and dollars with this master plan. It's come together over a period of years, and I hear about $15 million worth of investment, I believe, so far, with some more coming. And it's very close in my mind to, I don't know what Career Center redevelopment in Kennedy was, but I think proceeds were in the $12 to $15 million range, I think, from the sale of their old Career Center. I bet they put every dollar of it back into that. So there's $30-some million worth of public investment immediately surrounding this, and there is a challenge with attracting private investment in nearby proximity to a shelter. That's a fact, whether there should be or not.
That's a family shelter or a shelter that has the typical stigma
Mr. Murphy,
attached to
now,
it.
the IP also, in the churches that are in there, now they can have homeless in them, and fairly intense homeless that are in this neighborhood.
Temporary shelter.
Yeah, temporary shelter, such as Cleveland, which is right there, the property right next to it.
Correct, but it would be a limited duration of, I think we just changed it up to 120 or 150
Right,
120 days.
which is period of time, though, a good period of time. And generally that is done seasonally as the population grows, and as the population decreases, there are other homeless shelters that tend to take up the slack, correct? So, I mean, the intensity could still be there is what I'm seeing in that.
Well, I think the concept on initial look is that it's going to be negative, nobody will invest. But is there an opportunity for real education about what kind of shelter this is to mitigate that somewhat? First response, maybe I'm not going to invest. But if the two entities working together said, this is what's really here, can you mitigate that and support each other with that and make it, like you were saying, a win-win for everybody?
I think it definitely fits in at some point because it's part of that continuum of care that they were talking about. And so you start with the folks that are in the most vulnerable position and you move them into less vulnerable housing. I think it definitely fits in with that plan. But I'm very sympathetic to
you've got to look the most people that we benefited in the long run. If you were to shut down total redevelopment, then you've harmed more people than you've helped, big picture. But I guess I have more faith in people than to think that someone that really wanted to invest in the plan, would turn their back and walk away because there was a family shelter of temporary nature close by.
Yep. That's true.
I feel similarly. I'm a big proponent of economic development, but at the same time, I'm a big proponent of meeting human needs. And there's a lot of people who may be turned away because of this, and there's no way of denying that. However, there's a bunch of folks who will benefit from it right away. Would you say going from 84 to 96 beds? That's significant. We need every one of those beds. But at the same time, in the long term, we don't want to turn people away from investing in our community. I'm a big fan on both sides of 52. So what we're doing on the west side with Innovation Quarter matters a great deal, but it's impacted by what happens on the east side of 52 as well.
And there's where I'm torn. As being a person who grew up on the East Winston side, I can recall some 30 to 40 years ago revitalization attempts to make the neighborhood economically strong. I remember them failing. I remember the people involved in those efforts who felt so strongly about the failure of those attempts. And so I'm really on the fence here. I still at this moment don't know how I'm going to vote because I am passionate about seeing East Winston grow economically. I'm passionate about people wanting to invest in East Winston. I am concerned that there may be people who will not want to invest as a result of seeing a shelter this close. And at the same time, I have a heart for the people that are in the shelter who are trying to get back on their feet. So I know how you feel.
Yeah, like you, Tommy, I'm very much on the fence about this. Recently, I was involved with the North Central Area Plan, which is not too far from here, and I was struck by the attitudes of the residents. They seemed to like the plans that were being proposed, but they were very skeptical about whether any of this was ever going to come to fruition. And they were saying, these are nice ideas, but how is it ever going to happen? And the answer they were given was, well, you have to have investment, and that has to be private investment. And so I really hear what you're saying, Mr. Woods, because that was the big problem, in trying to bring something about, that you need the investment. And if it is going to hamper it, and if this was a plan that involved the public, that had public support, that had public input into it, I really don't want to see anything damage the prospects of that coming to fruition.
But to that I would say, at the time that was discussed, it was not. What if someone at the time had the foresight to say, well, maybe we want to start a little bit lower and have this element of the homeless families and bring it from there to where we're going? Would the community have said, well, no, we don't want those part of the plan in there. We only want the next level up. So I have a hard time just saying because it wasn't in the initial plan that it doesn't fit with that.
Major Allison, if you could come back up a minute, I have a couple questions I still wasn't clear on. I know you said 96 beds, but tell me how many units, how many housing, how many families, how's that going to be done?
And that will be determined by the makeup of the various families. If it's a mom and two small children, would be in the same room with another mom and two small children. And so for us, it's a matter of matching up age and so forth into the various rooms.
But you're going to have to, the rooms already existing in this building?
Yes, sir. The rooms already exist.
So how many rooms are in the building then? That's what I'm trying to get to.
8 rooms.
8 rooms.
8 rooms, and we can put 12 people to a room.
That's not a family. So you put multiple families in one room?
Yes, and that's what we're doing currently as well. I mean, that's what makes this building so attractive, is the fact that it's already there. We'll spend better than $200,000 upfitting it interiorly, adding showers to the existing rooms. There's already bathrooms in all but one of the rooms we're going to use. Would simply add the toilet and the sink and the shower at the same time. Also, as a matter of interest, possibly to the group in decision making, we have leased 901 Cleveland Avenue for the next 5 years. So our offices are going to be in that location. That may be where the 5-year piece came in somewhere in our thinking. Now, certainly, we hope that we're not going to have to, the building's not going to be sold in the next 5 years, and we have to relocate our entire operation. So we plan to be at 901 Cleveland for the next 5 years. And again, that's what makes it beneficial to buying the daycare and bringing the family shelter onto that property as well.
I do believe Ms. Painter said the plan was to come here for 5 years and then go somewhere else.
Right. That's
okay.
The optimum. I mean, if all the stars line up and all the everything happens as according to the way we would like to see it, certainly.
Well,
in a very straightforward manner, we do not want to be or plan to be at 939 Cleveland any longer than we have to be. And we would love to sell that property when we are able to relocate. We'd love to sell it to the housing authority and allow them to continue with their economic development for that area.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if you buy it and you're talking about putting $200,000 in it, and how you're going to sell it in 5 years and get your money back. I mean, I guess you're just going to walk away from some of that.
We view what we're going to do with this building, purchase it, upfit it, as an investment in those who will walk through the front door of that building. It's an investment in people, and people matter most.
So you're willing to take the loss if possible?
If that's what happens, yes.
But there's no assurance that you're going to sell it in 5 years. That, you know,
No.
Well, that's on both sides.
Yeah.
Like I said, no assurance that they're going to want anybody want to buy it in 5 years.
Right.
I mean, housing authority or whatever.
And the church beside us, a church just bought it, and I'm sure they're not anticipating leaving in 5 years either.
So how would the residents here, the children would go to school with the other community children?
We're blessed.
To those
Let me
schools,
just
or?
give a kudo to the Forsyth County school system. We're blessed with Project Hope and their involvement with our family shelter, and they make it possible for the children of our families to continue going to the school they were attending when their family became homeless, which is a huge blessing from the Forsyth County school system to the Salvation Army, and more importantly to those children. There's enough turmoil and tension and unrest in your life when you become homeless as a child. Then you have to go to yet another school and explain to people, okay, how did you get here? Well, most likely they lie because they don't want to say we have nowhere to live or we're living at the Salvation Army. And so the children are able to go to the school that they are in when they became homeless. And that's a huge benefit to those children.
You know, I think it's a real plus that the Salvation Army, you know, this is the Salvation Army we were talking about, and all of us know about the Salvation Army, and I can't praise them enough for the things that they do in the community and have done. And I understand about the private investor. Believe me, I'm big on private investment. That's the way downtown finally came to life, was with private investment. But we still have homeless people downtown. So it's, you know, like I said, to me it's a win-win situation. 5 years, you know, we don't know if that will come about or not. But in the meantime, look at the families that are going to be helped, that the Salvation Army is going to help. I mean, we don't have to do anything, but the thing about it is, you know, our gut feel is that, you know, we're here to help other people. And I think this is one thing that can do it. I also hear what Mr. Wood says. And, you know, he's got a valid point. They've got a large investment up here. But the thing that I keep thinking is, when you say are you all saying that the verbiage of a homeless shelter, is that what runs private investors away, just that verbiage? Because to me, what they have is they're in charge of these homes. It's not like they're running wild or you know, I would sort of take for granted that they don't really go outside the shelter per se, and the playground, and yeah, but I mean, they're not out on the streets and that type thing. So what I'm trying to say is, I think that maybe what you're trying to draw a picture of when you say homeless shelter is something that it's over and beyond what the homeless shelter really is. Am I thinking right on that? Can y'all help me with that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, from the outside looking at that building, there are 8 rooms with 12 beds. It could be 24 rooms with 4 beds each, too. You know, you don't know from the outside looking in. And there's going to be kids coming in and out, just like it would in an apartment complex.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's got that stigma. There's a stigma. So, you know, I'm torn. I'm like everyone else here. I think we certainly appreciate everything Mr. Woods has done. We appreciate everything the Salvation Army does. We want to help these homeless single moms and families, and it's a tough call.
Well, I'll go back to what Paul said about it. There should be a win-win in here somewhere with this, with the two organizations really committed to serving the same kind of people. And I do have an optimism belief in the plan, the master plan. Yeah, very proud that we've done that, the initiative that was taken to do that. And I just, in my heart, have a very hard time believing that an investor that would come to that area because of that plan, because of whatever financial benefit there is in this kind of redevelopment, would not take advantage of it because this daycare is converted to a family shelter. And as it grows, if it is the place to be, then, if they're purchasing land, then maybe they want to purchase it. If they say, we would be here except for this center, then the answer is, okay, we'll make them an offer and everybody will win and it proceeds. I think there have got to be some options. We can't think of them all now. And I think we need to look at what's the best use with what we have in front of us to accomplish the goals and within what the rules say. You're looking at, if we could do this without having to rezone it, if it would fit within the IP use, of course that would have been the answer, but that's not possible, so we're having to make this call.
Major Allison, in your meetings with Mr. Woods, have you found any common ground on this?
I thought we had. We have certainly share a common interest. Common interest in a different segment of people would be one way to look at it. I mean, when they come to us, and he doesn't have a place for us to relocate them, then they're still with us. It's either us or the streets, and there's a gap. And we the Salvation Army, 150. We'll be 150 years old this summer in July. Salvation Army have been here since 1907, and what we do best is live in the gap.
In a perfect world for you, 5 years from now, where would this shelter be?
I can't give you that answer. I mean, we have to raise money ourselves, and then we have to find property, and we'll certainly take Housing Authority up on helping us find that property. But for us, and the money we have at the table today, buying this building and upfitting it is something we can afford today. Today.
Well, if I'm not helping much.
What will the center be called? What would be the name that's on the door? Say if someone were coming and looking at the area and saying this is what we're interested in, what would they see when they came by if you were there?
At first thought, it would be the Salvation Army Family Shelter. You can't, or Center of Hope. You can't have a Center of Hope Part 2. And we may very well bring the name Center of Hope with us to that location. But it will be the Salvation Army Center of Hope for Families or the Salvation Army Family Shelter.
You want to help us, Mr. Norby?
Well, I don't. Given where the opinions that I've heard from there, I don't know that I'm going to be helping a lot. But I will say that I've been in the public sector for a few decades and have had a particular passion for wanting to revitalize urban neighborhoods and downtown areas and all that. And so I can say that what Mr. Woods is expressing there in terms of the cold feet that investors or lenders who are probably going to be in places all around the country and are not going to be intimately familiar with this neighborhood, but they're going to be looking at it on the surface level. And I think when you're doing urban and neighborhood revitalization, it's a very fragile thing to build the positive momentum that helps bring an area back. And so in those early stages of the process, that is something to be very concerned about. I think certainly a shelter for the homeless families is certainly a better thing than kind of a standard homeless shelter. So that certainly helps. But is that going to have a chilling effect on the kinds of investors and perhaps even the ultimate homeowners or renters who are families too, who are going to want to decide whether to invest in that area? I think the dilemma is these are two very excellent community objectives. Revitalize a neighborhood and bring it back, and an area that people would not invest in, an area that people stayed away from, turn it into an area of mixed income, mixed use, and all that. Extremely good objective, and that's something that we certainly want to be about. And you've got another good objective is helping families who desperately need help. And so the question in our mind, as we're looking at this staff report, if this were the only site in the community that was available, then we definitely have a difficult decision to make. But this may not be the only site. Yes, it is the site that they have identified. It's the site that they have tried to work on. But is that the only site that there could be? And I think our concern is, given the adopted or the endorsed plan by both this board and the city council, and the objectives for that revitalization, I think our concern in terms of our staff recommendation was that putting it here at this time runs the risk of putting a chilling effect on the reinvestment in this particular area. Yes, we should find a place for this facility because it is needed. So that's kind of the perspective that we're coming from.
Well, my question to that is, and Mr. Woods might be able to answer this, but is there private investors ready to come in now? I mean, we don't know the timeline here with private investors. It may be 5 years before a private investor would come in. I'm just guessing.
Right. Well,
but I'm just saying, if they're out here now, ready to come in, that's one thing. But if you're betting on the come, I mean,
But keep in mind, this is a very large urban neighborhood that has bunches of issues in getting its revitalization. I think given that it was 4 years ago, they've made some good progress, but urban revitalization does take time. Think about downtown.
Oh, yeah.
Think about how long we've been working on downtown revitalization, and think about those first pieces of residential that got done and created the concern, hey, we need to have more diversity in our housing. It became a very popular place for empty nesters with higher incomes and all that, but then people said, wait a minute, we need to start diversifying this. So it kind of went from there. So it does take a period of time to do that, but given that, they've already made a fair amount of progress in getting this ball rolling.
Yeah, I'd like to put a different spin on that. I come from a neighborhood that had a number of group homes, served a very diverse population of folks in need, and helped rebuild that neighborhood despite these various economic, various service-related group homes that were in that area, and homeless shelters that were served by the churches that were in our neighborhood as well. And from personally having run group homes and knowing the populations there, and having worked with families that live in your shelter on Trade Street and working with many of them, I know the populations aren't that different at all. And so I think the real challenge to you as the Salvation Army is, how can you benefit what is happening to that redevelopment plan? I don't think that both of these ideas are antagonistic. I think you can develop communities that recognize and support the needs and care of other folks. And you have a lot of churches there that bring that same Christian care as well. So I think your commitment and Salvation Army's commitment to make that property look as good as it can possibly look, to enhance the way it works with the Housing Authority, and to look for money together for the Housing Authority for the development there, is really the vision that needs to be pulled together here, because I know it can work, because I've lived through it. So I would make a motion, Mr. King, to approve this with a reservation, with the qualification that I believe Mr. Murphy was working on there in terms of that.
Limited it to families as defined in the UDO.
Mm-hmm. I'll second.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bryan, second by Ms. Smith. Any more discussion on this?
Yeah, I guess I have to say that I lean in the direction of there should probably be a better location and find a better location for this facility. And that's what's influencing my decision.
Any other comments? I'm leaning towards continuing for 30 days, let the two of them get their plan together and come back and tell us how they're going to make this work myself. But I don't know if any more discussions could be held between them or not. I agree with Mr. Brown. There ought to be some way that they can work together and could be mutually beneficial. I understand the private investment. I also understand homeless children.
Well, and I agree with you about the private investment. I keep thinking back towards that too, but I keep looking at downtown. I mean, and what George just said. I mean, it takes time for them. I don't know. I can't sit here and say that what timing is what by any means, but I just know this kind of things take time. But I also know that there's families waiting to be helped right now, and that's the reason that I'm going to support the motion, because I just have a feeling for those people, and I really honestly believe, and this is not wishful thinking, I honestly believe that this will work out with Mr. Woods and the Salvation Army. I really do. Yeah. And Mr. Woods, he is in the same business, and he even says that he has his shelters were full. When you had people to come in, and so, but anyway, no, that's okay. I just feel like it'll work out.
And I honestly believe also the City Council is going to debate this for an hour or two when it gets to them as well.
Probably.
So whatever we do here, we're going to hear the same thing.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah. Okay. We have a motion for approval. Any other comments or discussion?
One further comment. I'm going to take a gamble here on the side that these investors are going to see that this area, including this spot of the Cleveland Avenue area, close to the campus of what was formerly Kennedy and now Forsyth Tech, and so close to the heartbeat of Innovation Quarter, I happen to know there's going to be at least another 1,800 people moving to that downtown area very soon, coming from all parts of the United States to help with the Innovation Quarter effort, scientists, researchers, and so on. And there's going to be a lot of vying for space, and I personally think they're going to run out of space in the lofts that are being built at Plant 64 right now. They're going to have to go somewhere because these folks are used to living, working, and playing very close to where they do their 9 to 5. So I'm going to pray that these investors will still invest, because I have a heart for East Winston-Salem. So with that, that's how I'm going to move.
Any other comments? We have a motion for approval. Those in favor? Those opposed? Mr. Lamb and Ms. Donegan. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Next item on your agenda is zoning docket W3260. And the petitioner is Westside Baptist Church. And the property is 4.96 acres located on the east side of Peacehaven Road, north of McGregor Road. And the request is a special use limited request from RS9 residential single family to IP institutional public. Special use limited for the sole use of church or religious institution neighborhood, which is a church that has 600 seats or less, main sanctuary. It's located within the suburban neighborhoods, Growth Management Area 3. This is a zoning map showing the subject property there, located in yellow. You can see the church, a little over 10,000 square feet, located there on the property. It's on the east side of Peacehaven Road, and just north of the intersection there of Peacehaven and McGregor Road. It's a fairly low-density portion of Forsyth County of Winston-Salem, just kind of scattered single-family homes. Not really any other non-residential use or zonings in this general area. To the north, you have Jonestown Road and the intersection there with the interstate. But aerial photographs showing the subject property, you can see for the most part pretty heavily wooded. There is some residential subdivision directly south of the church. And the area plan, the Southwest Suburban Area Plan, this is the current draft. It's being updated. Both the existing plan and the draft plan both recommend institutional use for the subject property. You can see there in blue. Surrounding land use recommendations is for low-density single-family residential. The area plan does recognize the value of institutional uses such as churches and recommends their expansion, provided that it's done in a way that's compatible with the single-family homes in that area. There's the church there. This is taken from Peacehaven Road, and this is looking north on Peacehaven Road, the subject property to the right. As per your staff report, really the reason for this request is this sign here in question. This is taken during the daytime, obviously, and this sign is turned off. It's an electronic message board sign, which certainly you've seen those around the community. Fairly bright, intense signs. These types of signs are not allowed in residential districts as the property is currently zoned. Therefore, the request to the IP district, which does allow electronic message board signs. Back in January, this sign was installed by a professional sign installer, and no permit was obtained. It came to inspection staff attention after someone had a near accident in this area, reported the sign to the inspection staff, who then went out, noticed the sign, noticed that no permit has been issued, and cited the church for that violation. And therefore, you have this request before you to seek relief through the rezoning mechanism. This is directly across the street, and this is looking south there on Peacehaven, the entrance to the church right there, and you can see the intersection there with McGregor Road. In the background there on the right, you can see a school bus. There's a long line of sight heading north on Peacehaven that really goes right into this site, making this sign very, very visible, particularly at night, and potentially distracting. The only requested use is church or religious institution neighborhood, which would accommodate the existing church. IPL is a reasonable rezoning request at this location. We certainly feel like that's a reasonable request. Typically, community-scale churches, but several neighborhood-scale churches are also zoned IP, and that's a reasonable district. But it would permit the use of electronic message board sign, and it would permit the existing one to remain on site, provided a permit is obtained. And the sign is already proven, as I mentioned earlier, to be a distracting to motorists in the area, and we feel like it is out of character with the low-intensity development pattern along this section of Peacehaven Road. So staff's recommendation is for denial unless there is a condition that there be no electronic message board signs. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff at this time?
Yeah, Gary, I had a question. I think I asked you this at sign check, but I just wanted to make sure. I know there are different rules for cell towers in IP versus RS.
Yes.
And so if this is limited zoning, does that mean because of the limitation, those more generous allowances in IP not obtain?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, this is only for the church. So
Okay.
a normal accessory use of church may be a daycare if the church runs it, things like that, but no other land uses could take place there.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Roberts, would you remind us again what the limitations are on lighted signs?
Well, for electronic message board signs, the delay interval is 2 hours. For new signs, they have to stay static for 2 hours.
And the church is aware of this as well?
Yes, I feel sure that they are aware of that, yeah. Perhaps initially when the sign was installed, that was not the case, the 2-hour delay. I'm making an assumption, but I think they're aware that if it is approved, it's 2-hour delay.
Okay.
Let me ask one more question. So other than the message board, what is the reason to rezone?
That really
was the only
that
reason.
is the only reason, right?
And so your recommendation is denial unless that isn't allowed.
Right.
Just clarify.
It's not just in this particular case, it is the message board, but churches in residential areas are not allowed internally illuminated signs. An electronic message board is considered an internally illuminated sign.
Thank you.
Okay. First person signed up to speak, Robert Dixon.
My name is Robert Dixon. I reside at 265 North Gordon Drive in Winston-Salem, 27104. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board today. I'm also the pastor of Westside Baptist Church. Our church organized in 1977 and moved into our current facility in June of 1983. At that time, there were few houses in that Peace Haven Road area of Forsyth County. In recent years, our property was annexed by the city of Winston-Salem. Last fall, our church decided to upgrade our sign to include an electronic message board. We contacted a local sign company who had erected our original sign and contracted with them for the new sign. We were led to believe they would secure all proper permits required for the project. Early this year, we were notified by the inspections office that our sign was in violation of city ordinances. This had come to their attention in response to a complaint they received in regard to the brilliance of the sign at night. I would like to note that no one has ever contacted our church with any request that the sign be adjusted in any way except for folks working for the city of Winston-Salem. The president of the sign company is present today if you would like to speak to him about the potential for adjusting the brilliance of the sign. We've not been given that opportunity now because the city's asked us to turn off the sign until a proper permit is secured. So we've not been able to address that concern. Our motive in using the sign is to create a positive identity in our community, not to infuriate or bother the very people we are interested in reaching. To resolve the problem with our sign being non-compliant, we made this application for a change in our zoning status from RS9 to IP so we would qualify to have such a sign. Should our request be ultimately granted by the City Council, it is our intent to apply for the proper permit necessary to bring our sign into compliance with the city's ordinances. There are other churches in Winston-Salem with an IP zoning status, even though they are bordered or surrounded by RS zoning status neighborhoods. A few of those are Peace Haven Baptist Church, New Philadelphia Moravian Church, and Knollwood Baptist Church, and there are others. We are not asking for any special consideration. We are only asking for the same privilege that other churches are able to enjoy. There are even some churches with signs similar to ours that are considered legal, non-compliant, for various reasons. They enjoy the use of an IP zoning status even though they never had to apply for a change in their zoning status. In applying for this change, we have made the extra effort and paid the greater fee in order to have our status limited to only church or religious institution neighborhood scale. We feel that that would best help us communicate to our neighbors that we have no intent of being anything other than a church. We would just like to be a church with a modern electronic message board sign. Before the city contacted our neighbors, we sent out 38 letters, one to every property owner whose property is within 500 feet of our property, explaining why we seek the change of our zoning status. We invited them to attend an informational drop-in meeting at our church from 6 to 7 on Thursday, March 19. For those who could not attend, we provided our mailing address, phone number, and my email address, and encouraged them to contact us with their questions or concerns. No one attended the meeting other than City Councilman Robert Clark. And as of today, no one has contacted me regarding this change, with one exception. Leanne Harris, one of our neighbors who is present here today, is serving as the president of the Oxford Place Homeowners Association. Their board members had some questions, and I spoke with Leanne about this. I provided her with copies of some of your documents about zoning. Later, I forwarded to her an email from Gary Roberts of the Planning Office that summarized the difference between a church or religious institution of a neighborhood scale and a community scale. With that, I assured her that our request to have our zoning status changed to IP would be limited only to church or religious institution neighborhood scale. In response to that note, she replied, and I quote, "The Oxford Place Homeowners Association Board is in support of the additional limited zoning change request. We sincerely appreciate the church's extra efforts in protecting the integrity of our neighborhood and your due diligence with this matter," end of quote. Those neighbors are well aware of our sign. We used it to promote their annual meeting held in our facility in January of this year. And that is an aspect of this question that I would like for you to consider. We do not use the sign only to promote our own activities, but we look for opportunities to promote items of interest to the people of our community. Along with promoting national holidays, we call attention to items of interest to our neighbors. We note when it is the week for the city to pick up the recyclables so our neighbors can remember to roll out the recyclable cans. We remind people of the biannual time changes and encourage them to check the batteries in their smoke detectors. We promote public meetings, such as the Planning Board's community kickoff meeting last December at the Little Creek Recreation Area. We promote other businesses that relate to our Christian nature, such as local radio stations and concerts at local venues. We recognize other local charities with whom we cooperate. We call attention to local citizens with noteworthy achievement, such as West Forsyth High School's Ethan Hnasco, who in February won the state wrestling championship. We also seek to encourage folks with positive, uplifting messages. But this request is not for a sign. This request is to change our zoning status to institutional and public limited use. For you to evaluate our request based on the sign is unfair to us. Should another church purchase the property that is for sale now, just a few hundred yards up the street from us, they could apply for this same zoning status without having to reveal whether or not they intend to erect a sign similar to ours. With no reason to deny the request, it would very likely be granted, and then they could legally, without having to acquire any further permission other than appropriate building permits, be able to erect a sign just like ours, and that would not be fair. It's not fair for you to evaluate this request for any reason other than the use of the property as a church and religious institution, neighborhood scale, which has been our practice for more than 30 years. Imagine a local building contractor going to a bank to apply for a loan to purchase a work vehicle. Imagine he was told that he was an excellent candidate for the loan due to his credit score, healthy cash flow, and the fact that he was paying for half of the vehicle up front. Then imagine the bank telling him that they were prepared to loan him all the money he requested, but only if he did not buy a large diesel dually pickup, because the bank staff felt that such a truck was problematic on the community's roadways. It took up too much space, belched out pungent diesel fumes, and intimidated other drivers. I believe we would all agree that a bank does not micromanage which vehicle a customer buys as long as the customer qualifies for the loan. Neither should you evaluate the worthiness of our request for the same privilege enjoyed by many other churches in our community based upon our legal and pre-approved allowance to erect a sign or any other legal use of our property as allowed by the city ordinances for a property zone, institutional and public, limited. For those reasons, I would ask you to recommend to the City Council that they grant our request to have the zoning status for our property changed to IP limited. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Leanne Harris.
Hello, I'm Leanne Harris. I reside at 404 Drexmoor Court, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. I am a homeowner in the Oxford Place neighborhood, which is adjacent to the Westside Baptist Church. And as Robert Dixon pointed out, I am the president of the Homeowners Association. In speaking with our board, we are in support of this. I also personally reached out to the other 30 homeowners in our neighborhood, and we had a majority to support the rezoning request. And again, as we understand it, Westside Baptist Church is seeking to limit their zoning change request to only church or religious institution and neighborhood and forego all other possible uses of the property in regard to the zoning change request. That means if the church were to sell their property, the new buyer could only use it for church or religious institution and neighborhood, or go through the same process again at that time to get the limit removed and the zoning change approved. Again, the majority of our neighborhood supports the zoning change request.
Thank you. That's all folks who have signed up. Anyone else like to speak in support of this? Anyone like to speak in opposition? I declare the public hearing closed.
Would we have recommended IP had they come prior to this? Probably so. wouldn't
On
we?
consent agenda, yeah.
Yeah, consent.
Probably.
Yeah.
But we go with what we know at the moment, and we just felt like there was a health, safety, and welfare concern, and
Yeah, from the petitioner offering the opportunity for his sign vendor to talk, it sounds like they also are willing to do some toning down of lumens and things like that, I assume, probably.
Well, the other churches that he mentioned or whatever, is their signs just as bright? I mean, that was my question. I think the complaint that I hear here is that the brightness of the sign.
right.
I
think the difficulty is in enforcement.
Regardless, I was going to say, regardless of where, I mean, if you were in HB and had an electronic message, there's nothing in the ordinance that regulates intensity.
Right.
There's nothing that regulates intensity on a billboard. The LCD TV kind of billboards out there. There's nothing that regulates the lumens. The only thing we're dealing with is the rate of change, and I don't know what the rate of change was whenever the person that contacted our office was, whether it was doing some, whether it was changing quickly and it was like it went from a dark background to a light background, and that was what the distraction was, whether it was the brightness of it, whether it was some other factor. But I mean, certainly the church and the sign contractor can work together, with perhaps the concerned person, anyone else, to tone it down. But that's not anything we can regulate ourselves. All we can regulate are the rate of change.
Right, and it sounds like the petitioner doesn't want to aggravate his community.
Sure. And do we know what the reasons are that these other churches are IP? What benefits do they get from it being IP, zoned as IP?
Well,
There's a lot of them already.
There's many. I mean, churches are allowed in all districts, but some have chosen to be IP. I can't tell you what their reasons were for asking, but
so they could have an electronic sign legally.
Larger.
Well, and
it was before the.
Keep in mind, I mean, basically, since the adoption of the sign ordinance, I mean, there were some electronic message board signs that existed prior to the adoption of the ordinance that would be considered legally nonconforming. We haven't issued any permits to a church in an RS district for an electronic message board sign since the adoption of the ordinance in July of 2007 or whatever the effective date was. That's when the ordinance was adopted.
Okay, so the way the ordinance is, in the RS, the setting that they're in, there's no illuminated signs allowed.
Internal. You can have an external spot.
For that. So they're still in the same setting, the same location.
It's just changing.
Nothing has changed as
except
far
the
as
zoning.
the setting that they're in, and the lighting requirement was, the reason behind that, if I recall, was because you were in that residential setting and you did not want the stronger lights and distracting lights in it.
True, but keep in mind, and I wasn't here when the zoning conversion was done. If the church was there in '95, why it wasn't converted to IP at that time, I don't know what the methodology was for the conversions, but if it had been converted to IP at the time that the UDO conversion was done, 94, 95, they could have also had the sign, but it just wasn't done that way at that time, and I don't know why. I don't know what the rationale was.
I'm weighed in on this. There's a church near me has a sign almost identical to this, and it's in the county, so it's flashing, scrolling, doing all that. And it doesn't concern me nearly as much as people I'm meeting head on that are texting and talking on the phone and that sort of thing. So this sign is a legal sign. It's not in this setting right now, but I mean, it complies with the sign ordinance in size.
That would be 8 feet and 50 square feet in area, and it appears to be compliant. Right.
Tongue-in-cheek, I would say we didn't have the sign ordinance. It could have been 15 feet up in the air, and we wouldn't be having this problem. Wouldn't be blind. But anyway, that's a different story. To Mr. Lamb's point, if the church had come in and requested IP zoning, and the neighborhood was not opposed to it, it'd probably been on consent agenda. It'd been approved. They go next week and get them a permit, and they put up this very same sign. We've had one complaint. One person complained about the sign. That's it, and we don't even know who they are. Well, I mean, I guess we do, but
no neighbors opposed.
No neighbors opposed it too.
So is that how this came up, that there was one complaint?
One complaint.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if the full script of the email, but it was an email complaint that came into me.
I saw one email in here, but was that it?
And he actually sent it twice.
Yeah, I can't remember if that was the first or the second email, but it's been brought up a couple of times. It may have been I think it was back in the fall originally, then he checked back in early January to see what the status of this was. I can't remember exactly when the NOV went out, but it's been going on for several months.
Chris, would there be any other changes to I know they've restricted it to the neighborhood church, but the IP, it doesn't change any other uses allowed on the property as far as the neighborhood church IP versus neighborhood church residential?
One of the big differences, it doesn't change the uses. I mean, I think they have agreed to restrict their use, but if and when they decide to expand, since they are IP adjacent to RS, it will require a minimum 10-foot type 2 buffer yard, I believe is what the requirement would be. So if they come in to do an expansion in the future of their church facilities, they'll have to install a buffer yard. That's the only major difference.
So it increases their restrictions.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Would they have to do a rezoning to expand since they're limiting to neighborhood?
No. Well, I mean, again, as long as it doesn't expand their seats beyond that 599
So they
cap.
couldn't go to community without rezoning?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. My one concern about this is really the placement of the sign. This is sort of a bend in the road, and the sign we saw from the picture, was very close to the road. Is it possible to move the sign a little bit? I mean, I don't know if the church would be amenable to that, or are they committed to that location for the sign?
Where would you move it to, Ms. Duncan?
I don't know. I mean, it just seemed like...
Looks like to me it's out of the right of way. I mean,
It is. They've had the property surveyed.
Yeah.
It's on the edge, but it's a couple of feet
Right.
on private property.
but you can, from this angle, it's behind the telephone poles. I would think it would be out of the right of way.
Well, I personally have no problem with the sign. There's many more than one person who's driven by, and only one person complained. I think that the way that they're using the sign has a lot of benefit for the entire community. So I'm ready to make a motion that we approve this.
Second. Motion by Mr. Younger, second by Mr. Lamb. Further discussion? Any more questions, Ms. Dunnigan, about moving or anything? Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion for approval. All in favor? Any opposed? Ms. Smith opposed. That's approved. Thank you. Okay.
I think that brings us to the Southwest Suburban Area Plan.
All right.
Southwest Suburban.
Good late afternoon, Commissioner Chair.
Glad you recognize that.
We'll do a very abbreviated version of the presentation on Southwest Suburban. We, as with all the update plans, had 3 community meetings and 1 drop-in session, and got the pictures for that. There are 3 plans underway, east, northeast, the north central, and the southwest suburban. And the yellow star is the area that, in light blue, that is covered by this plan. The existing land use is primarily, it's tale of 2 halves. The southern half of the area below Clemensville Road is pretty much large lot residential, vacant, or agricultural use. And the area to the north is a mixture of industrial, single-family residential, and multifamily. There are 4 changes that I'm going to speak to very briefly. One is the area highest up and to the right is a reduction of the activity center for Haynes Mall. That's the purple area, and then the blue area is Forsyth Medical Center. We took out some of the areas on the opposite side of Stratford Road. The other change was to identify the area of Haynes Mall Boulevard between Stratford Road and the Interstate 40 bridge that you go across Interstate 40 from just mixed use to recognized as an activity center, because it does have uses that draws people from
beyond just this county. The other two uses are down the bottom right, an area near the Clemensville Road, Ebert Road Activity Center is being shown in orange for low-density attached residential, and there's an expanded area around the elementary and middle schools off of Everett Road that is shown for single-family residential. And those are the significant changes. Again, this shows how the area around the activity center has been reduced about Haynes Mall to just include the mall, a couple of shopping centers, and the hospital. We think the future development for this activity center is likely going to be a more intense development of the mall, and this gives you some examples of an area that could be built adjacent to Belts, which is a focal point, and then a boulevard which might be located in the southern portion near where Dick's Sporting Goods is. And there's another drawing that show where there could be multifamily on the east side of the mall. Again, these are illustrative and may or may not happen, but they will show as this area continues to grow that there's additional room for development at the mall. Other thing we mentioned is that South Stratford Road is identified as a growth corridor. It doesn't change any of the land uses. It just introduces some form guidelines in case somebody tries to rezone that would maintain the suburban and rural character of that area. And the major transportation recommendations, although the section of the Beltway is shown for this area, it's a long ways off. The two projects that are immediate are the Idols Road connector, which is to start construction next year. We'll go from Hampton Road and Clemens all the way to Stratford Road. And there'll also be a replacement of the bridge and interchange at US 421 in Peacehaven. And I'll be glad. I have had some phone calls from some residents who may want to talk about a possible change in the land use map. I don't know if any of them are here or signed up to speak, but you may get those comments. But other than that, that's it.
Good job, Mr.
Let me say great job. I enjoyed being a part of the conversation with this particular area plan. I think there was a lot of great community participation.
Thank you. Okay, signed up in support, Mr. Shore.
Yes. My name is Herbert Tom Shore. I live at 3330 Burke Mill Road, Winston-Salem, 27103. And I know it's late and I don't have a lot to say. I just want to know that I'm in support of the petitioner. And I've talked to neighbors, and so are they, if that means anything.
Okay.
So we are in support.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Anyone else like to speak in support? If not, we have one opponent, Ms. Parker. This reminds you of a school board meeting, doesn't as long as we take.
Felt right at home. Thank you. My name is Marilyn Parker. I reside at 3090 Copeland Road, Winston-Salem, 27103. And I wish that you had a little place on your thing to sign in that says just comments. I'm really not in opposition. I just would like to bring some things to your attention. And I want to kind of shift your thinking from a downtown perspective to that lower part of this plan, which is rural. And that's the way we would like to keep it. We've had a couple of instances in our area where we have had a change of zoning, which has caused developments to come in that have very, very small lots, which are not reflective of our community or even the area that we're in. And that's what we would like to guard against. As you're doing this, the plan, and what I'm told is that I need to come and tell you these things so that you will keep this in mind, and I hope that you will. There are two things I'd like for you to bear in mind. The first is that we are rural. We are a rural community. We have farmland. We have active farms there. We like to keep our land in large lots because that is what that community was built on, and that's the way we like to keep it. I say to shift your thinking because
as we want children to see a vibrant downtown, and I'm excited about downtown. I love to come from the country and come downtown for the evening, but we also need to have areas of our community and of our county that are reflective of a rural aspect of living and what that takes. So it's nice to drive children down and still see what a cow or a horse looks like in a natural environment. The second thing I'd like for you to bear in mind is that we are historic. You have one of the original 4 Moravian communities. I look out my window, the whole front of my house, I can look on a graveyard that has not had anyone buried in over 125 years. And there are people buried in that cemetery that have been there since the very first Moravians came to Forsyth County. And so you need to keep that in mind. Some of the pictures that were up there are of some historic barns and buildings that are still in this community, and we would like to keep it that way. And so please bear that in mind as you make your decisions. So all I'm asking you tonight is to allow this community and any future development of developments, the part that comes below the line that was outlined there, to keep that area indicative of what it is, what it has been, and what it needs to remain to be, which is historic and rural. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Anyone else like to speak in opposition or just make a comment? If not, I'll declare the public hearing closed.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion, Mr. Morgan, second, Mr. Lamb. Any discussion?
Could I just ask a question? I didn't get to ask Steve. I'm sorry. About the Ebert-Stratford connector. Is there any timetable on when that might be done?
Good question. I'm not sure I even show it in the transportation. Yeah, I do. It's to be development driven, which means as development occurs there to extend it. As of now, there are no plans for it to be constructed by the city or the state.
Okay.
15 years from now, that may change, but for the time being, it would only be completed as development occurs.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
If I could just mention, I think I was trying to figure out what Ms. Parker was talking about, and I think, as I recall, the only rezoning to a higher density single family that's happened at least in the last 15 years or so was off of Stratford Road there to RS7, right?
Which backs up to us.
Okay, I got you. And
the next one, you all very kind, the next one that we did, that is right above that, she made a bigger, changed
right.
some.
Well, and the other thing I want to point out, and I think the board knows this, is that a lot of that area that I think we agree is historic, would be good to keep rural and all that, has been zoned and is still zoned RS9, which can allow for 4 units to the acre there, and so I think what we have talked with neighbors about, if they're interested in preserving the rural character there, then they could do more than they think they could do on their own to initiate a rezoning of their property to something that's lower density, and that would assure things more than just leaving it RS9 and hoping for the best there.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, as it is, someone comes in and wants to build on RS9, we have no choice.
We could stop. Yeah, but certainly I understand the point about rezoning to a higher intensity. So.
Can I answer that question? There are people who we would rezone our property to be a higher, a different zone, but there are other people in that community that want to leave in our city.
Sure.
That's why.
Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion to approve. All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Do we have a short staff report? Oh, I'm sorry.
Because Connie was kind enough to stay all this time, there was a question at the briefing session from Mr. Bryan about Hayes Mall Boulevard, and we said we would have someone present.
Oh, yeah.
They would like to speak to that, and she probably wishes I had kept my mouth shut. But
there you go. Mr. Bryan and Connie meet in the hallway after the No, did you have do you want to hear?
Yours.
I think his question, and correct me if I'm wrong, your question was about the traffic flow on Haynes-Mall Boulevard.
Yeah, it's I've experienced it twice since that meeting, that the flow just isn't working.
Yes, that one of the issues in that area is the high volumes of traffic and the limited availability and the peak times when everyone wants to be there at the same time. And so to address that issue, we've had several things going on over the last few years. The first thing that we did was install a video surveillance cameras in that area so that we would be able to see without being out in the traffic ourselves. And so that allows us to be able to closely monitor what's going on. The next thing we have going on right now is a partnership with NCDOT, both Stratford Road and Haynes-Mall Boulevard are state roads, and we are currently upgrading our traffic signal system. It's a $20 million project, and we're changing out all of our field equipment and creating a greater infrastructure and connectivity to be able to have more flexible signal timing in that area. And the third thing that we recently purchased, MyAvision video count cameras, so that we can put them out and collect video images and conduct turning movement counts without having to have a lot of people with count boards in the field. And so we can have that data processed and using that to model the traffic to help optimize the flow in that area. So but hoping for improvements in the near horizon.
So you're optimistic. I mean, I see there's a general willingness to see that develop, and there's plenty of room down there as well. So, some proactiveness in terms of getting people in and out. But you see hope in that, in other words.
Well, I think with what we're doing, yes, the development will definitely increase traffic. How much more will it increase? It may not increase by the size of what's out there. Pass-by traffic will be a lot of what the businesses that are being developed in that area would greatly experience. So it may not be the same level of magnitude, but definitely it as we have seen, the trend is continual growth.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Connie, for being here.
Oh, that was staff
Okay.
report.
Okay, we have 2 pre-submittals for the next cycle. We have a deadline date coming up Monday, so we don't know the general use request, but we have 2 pre-submittals for special use, and we'll have 1 text amendment in addition to the one that we continued here. And then last thing I just want to do is hand out to you, this is another interesting little nationwide survey that we ended up in the top tier. We're actually in the top 10 of the most populous 100 metro areas in the country in terms of from a Gallup poll of people in their own communities being asked questions about their own community's well-being. So we turned out, and they measure criteria such as purpose, liking what you do each day, being motivated to achieve your goals, social, having supportive relationships and love in your life, financial, managing your economic life to reduce stress and increase security, and community, liking where you live, feeling safe and having pride in your community. Apparently they had some way of asking questions about that, took this poll, ranked the communities, and we turned out number 10 out of 100. So great. Thought you'd be interested in that. Second month in a row we've gotten rated high in something.
Pretty great.
That's it for staff reports.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any board members, anything for the good of the order?
I do. Everybody have a great month, and see you next month, and motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.